So if you're a battle-hardened C# developer and you've been looking at the latest Android app, you're thinking, I could do that. And then you discover the painfully daunting world of learning Java from scratch. I want my mommy. But fear not, Code Monkeys, because at XDA we spoke to one of the most prestigious developers on the planet. I'm talking about the CTO of Xamarin, the co-creator of Mono for Android, and all-around open source ninja, Miguel de Icaza. Welcome back, XDA crowd. My name is Jason. Today we continue our journey down the rabbit hole of code. Now, in my time, I've had the privilege of interviewing some very accomplished developers, but this one has to be one of the top 3 for sure. For those of you who don't know Miguel, he has an impressive resume. Not only was he the co-creator of GNOME and, of course, Mono, but he was ranked by Time Magazine as one of the top 100 people, or 100 innovators for the new century. But what's most impressive to me is that while in an interview with Microsoft, he chose to spend most of his time trying to convince his interviewers to make Internet Explorer an open source project. That, my friends, takes some stones. Now, before we get started, I did want to address one of the issues that's come up on the XDA forum about Mono and about Xamarin, and that's the fact that their free trial, although is wonderful, it only allows for a small amount of compiled code before you go on to the paid version. So I spoke to Miguel about that, and he assured me that will be remedied very soon. The free trial limit will be expanded, and if you use the free trial and you really find that you do need more than the 35K limit or whatever the limit is, you can email support and they will extend that for you until the next month or two when they actually change that free trial and extend the options for you. So here we go. We talked to Miguel about how Xamarin works and how it can produce clean code on the other end without losing much in the translation.
So what happened was that I got an invitation to join the Internet Explorer Spark team. So they say, well, you have experience in Spark. When you come over, help us port IE to the Spark. So I interviewed with several people in the group, and at the time, what I said is, strategically speaking, you would be better off open sourcing this thing, right? The value of Microsoft is the operating system, not the individual applications. And it's a pitch that I did to a number of people. I don't remember their names anymore, but it's a pitch that I still make. Sometimes you open source technologies because it doesn't give you a strategic advantage, right? So for example, even today, I would open source a lot of the apps that ship. I would recommend this to Microsoft. I would open source a lot of the apps that ship with the system. There's nothing to be gained of a proprietary advantage over a Notepad or Calc or any of the system applications. Only good can come out of it. People can look at the code. People can learn from the code best practices, real production code best practices. So a lot of these little utilities that run on top of the operating systems, I would just open source that. And I think that some people are starting to get that idea. So Microsoft is starting more and more to realize that there are pieces that are not strategic to their business, but that would be useful to teach people either best practices, show how to structure a program, show how to make it secure, that sort of thing. And they're starting to do it, but it's not as widespread as I would like it to be. Apple is a little bit better there. Apple open source is a very significant chunk of macOS, and I think it's a good blueprint of what to copy. I still think that Apple could open source more. There's a lot of things that people could benefit from by looking how they do certain things, and it doesn't really provide a strategic advantage to them. So I think that there's cases where you can make this choice and say, is our business really built on this? And are we going to lose customers, or are we going to lose revenue by open sourcing this chunk of code? Right. So what we do is we build, at the core of what the company does is we build compilers and tools that allow you to keep using .NET languages, in particular C#, to target Android and iOS. There's other things that you can target, but let's not talk about those for now. And the way that we do it is basically we ported the equivalent of the .NET runtime, and we put it on Android and we put it on iOS. And what that provides are things like threading, asynchronous operations, garbage collection, IO, thread pools, all of those things that the runtime provides. And we provided the class libraries that developers are familiar with. So System XML, XPath, serialization, IO, JSON, web services, all of that stuff. So we provide kind of this foundation. Think of them as the APIs that you would find on any .NET installation, the stuff that you can use both in a server and you can use in a client, right? So we provide that foundation. And then the next thing that we did is we built APIs that essentially talk to the native counterparts on each platform, right? So just like Windows Forms is a binding to the Win32 API, or the new WinRT APIs are a binding to the new Windows RT system, we created an equivalent binding, one for iOS and one for Android. So they're not compatible because each one of these is targeting the native and very specific APIs of each device, right? So on iOS, we surface essentially for every single Objective-C type, we surface the equivalent one in C#. And for every Objective-C method, we surface the equivalent one in C#. And we repeat this process for Java. For every Java type, we expose it as a C# type. For every Java method, we expose equivalent in C#. And we spent a lot of time curating this. So it's not a, we just didn't throw all the APIs at the user. We actually made things conform to the .NET design guidelines. We made sure that we expose C# events, that you can use link over all these objects, that sort of thing. So basically, we made a first-class .NET library that lets you consume everything in the underlying platforms. So the first step is we do a one-to-one mapping. What that means is that if you're familiar with a concept on either Java or Objective-C, depending on the platform, the same exact concept exists in C#. Just happens to be a C# accessible class. So for example, iOS is built with this heavy focus on model view controller, and you have these abstractions that are very commonly used called view controllers. So in Objective-C, you would create view controllers, you would push view controllers, and we have the exact same thing in C#. They're also called UI view controllers, they're also pushed. So it's essentially a one-to-one mapping. It just happens that the API has been C# defined, right? So we use native C# constructors instead of the Objective-C name, which is init with something, right? So we basically did the mapping between the two universes so that C# developers actually get what they expect, and it integrates properly with the language.
Fantastic.
What I would say is a C# developer can build an application that runs on Android without knowing anything about Java. You don't need to know either Java or Objective-C. You don't need to use any one of those. You can live entirely in a C# world and deal with C# APIs and C# tools and build applications for both platforms. The biggest challenge that C# developers have is that the underlying models are not familiar to them, the Android model or the iOS model, right? So I think, for example, for a C# developer that comes to Java, not to Java, it's not even Java, it's Android. For example, Android has this notion of a screenful being an activity, right? And the life cycle of a screenful is not managed by you. Typically the way that you build a desktop app is your application launches and you control what goes into the screen and for how long it stays there. But in the Android world, you launch activities, and an application can contain a number of activities. But when you switch from one activity to the other, for example, if you're viewing a map and then you tap on the details to the map, you'll create a new activity, right? And the operating system can feel at liberty of killing your previous one. So you're not really in control of these things. So I think that's one of the challenging pieces, just to learn the way a new framework works, the Android framework. But it's not any different than an existing Java developer trying to build Android apps, because they're also going to face this new programming model. It's not what they're used to. So I would say the major difference really has to do with the underlying frameworks more than anything else.